Morgan's presence in spaces of writing, reading, listening, and talking has always been transformative in my experience. And while it's true that every person brings certain kinds of dimensions with them into spaces of communal work or play, I find it rare for a person to be able to, with such subtlety and intensity, generously grant their own dimensions to shared patterns of thought or subjects or questions as they emerge through their reception, both in hearing and speaking. And Morgan is that kind of person. What makes a presence of poems in the mouth or the mind is a question I bring out of working alongside Morgan or reading his work. Thinking of his youngness of oneness, it's a question the poems answer for me in ways that return me to them on the page and in my thoughts with a certain and unaccustomed freeness of desire. I find here the willingness to pour the self into the saying and also to let words as messengers, as carriers, leak and blur and throb into varietals of self and meaning. Sometimes there's a grounding doubling, a redundancy toward awareness, gently insistent. The voice of Morgan's poems is a bidding presence, embodied with specific directions, synonymous with open expression. Lines like beats of a wing, creating that difference in time space, but also being as it in a flow of force and fluid. Just beneath an anachronous humor, a casual devastation sweetens. Soft intensities for the wrongness, which is of durable interest. A kind of palling around with darkness, a willingness to stretch, to try it out in favor of getting into a very personal kind of knot that deeply pertains, belongs in more stretching. A self willing to move, to stagger, to get closer. There's this very particular poesis of a moving toward that is a mode of Morgan's poems and an element of his friendship, one which appeals deeply to the cat in me. I've studied his parable of the orb, knowing the time of its arc from a bed of love and looking, falling away from its ORB into its BRO, broadening into a speech. How the motion produces a sonic bend, the conceptual swerve, the character. At first, little fits of play, but then gravity, so much space and gravity. Reminding me of something Morgan wrote last summer on the subject of teaching as a walking together that might offer recognition and spaciousness to a person or a subject or a moment, rather than a seeking to attack or solve. The palpability of this writer's presence in the poem's willingness to set down a word and let it open up slowly and bigly. The feel of draw into ebb of the poems in repeated reading. The pacing into slide of Morgan's poems. I'd call it pedagogical, but also just as easily alchemical. These poems propose themselves as events and then purposefully drift toward these other recognitions, involvements, times that crack or allied with what's changing, what's possible, and even what's shared. Like accountings of what is to hand, the holding there. Like what soars and ails. Like the mystery of how to release and maintain this personal heat. Like the sky's discipline. Morgan lives in Brooklyn and is the author of the chapbooks Lights of Earth and Eat Pamphlet. As Frog organizer of GLOSS Gloss, a mutual aid-based publishing project, he works with a lot of love to bring out the energy involved in good poems and shares it toward organizations doing vital work. Let's all welcome Morgan.
Thanks, SJ. I love our friendship so much and also very much aspire to bring out the cat self. Thank you to Lonely and to Van and to James and to Artist Space. Am I coming through the mic okay? Think of me, I think of you, accruing inferences, hot on the flecked trail of past meteors. Come to me, I come to you, heavy with rattle, the kind of animals you carry too. Love's trident, portable fortress of solitude, swings around points of tiger lily, the outlying city, glimmering streams of good luck. Got 3 from the bookstore, bats in the minutes to go. Most of the rest of the reading is going to come from a serial poem called The End Comes Last. And there are a lot of formal things that go into it that I thought about trying to describe, and then it felt so heavy to try to describe or give that as the beginning of this piece, so I won't. And I'll just start. The Fool. I think my rib cage broke, and now I'm gonna throw it, float through the breakers, and have a look inside. Don't belong and I do, on both sides, impervious surface, black curtains around. Blown every which way, till everything leaks. My TNT, its exposed fuse, the purple magic 8-ball murk. One long extended visit with a hidden public sink. Go saying what you don't understand, straining after course and sound. The double. For daylight's basics, many happy belateds, and to all future harm, I'll try be there. For many, double lines converge in a mode. If mode be minor poverty, let lines engage thrift. Would you try on my eyes, tough wicks, mind bound tight as 2 rattan chairs? At the dump burn, smoke out a release of big bins of garbage, put shadows on corners and paths. Embouchure. 1 year cage piece, one sees words, as if they make tacit beneath as above. They would, but for situations. 2 tons are of one mind. Whisper shall not be. Sheltered or parted from, likewise fricative air. Held up to windows, I can see my own fog. Lands hot from unbottling, locked process for crowds. The pause is a vent, the space of the filament, tightened to lightening, for dilating a shade. To a crisp. Dark early I don't go, further than mix, emotions with a ration of 3rd story bay window petite. Slow flying things, a biscuit, a basket. Clock back, see what burnt, if I remember correct. To slow me down, my ploy on a barge, for wherever it took me, I harbored a pace that could clasp force. False pleasures breed genuine fuss, not that I'm under, not that I'm sore. Comes in waves. Dr. Tunchong had me have a hot jelly belly rub. And we still don't know the matter, but it must be something slowly made. A candle common, set in the tendon. Everyone who's anyone, I think, has to know. Bees do so, fleas do so, flinch after impulse. Twang is one's cries far apart from a key. Not a crisis precisely, difficult to pin, to point to, precision exactly. It's there, oh, there, oh, there. Your pipe and smoke. Empty stretcher rolling down, accessibility ramp, 2 nurses laugh happy, oh, I did see it go that way. Wishy-washy logic flaws, so easy caught judgy, meet so-called avoidable obstructions to nature's flow. Days later, lost to my own shyness and beans spilt, and the guilty fault that splits being into wires left and right. Pass out your wares to go the way go, the means and their haze, what passengers know. Empty beds. Mornings with glowworm worn about neck, pulling traces from dream hair, funny bone, white sky. There has to be some apathy between strangers, to act as a mirror before resembling, to guide stars through masses, elbows over rail. They do their dance in numbers, in gravities apart. Small talk en route, the glad bits and pieces, spoken to thighs, standing on balls. At scale. It's the real deal, Neil, or maybe not. No matter whatever altitudes achieved, I'm still just your ordinary man. Fellatio this, arboreal that, just like heaven on a plate. I can hold it till we get there. I can keep it secret, sure. In mixed states, commencement, wisps in a skillet flown full arabesque. It's just tones and tempered expectations at play. At present, holographic. It's like the boss is right on time. The end comes last. Poor man's thank you went to war for you. Yoda lays he who first laid himself. On this old marble, take a chance follows bottles to blows. How are you, my only friend? No means, no end, unless directed to do so. All your struts done fall on the floor. The dead man's float, age, weight, height, hearing aid install, Breaking Bad screen. Not to. The cinematic and the cinematic, flash floods of 4 fired. One's been shot, the other's in post. Wouldn't be a meal with none of the fixings. Flimsy still forthright, yet built like a bridge, to get one burrow further than one's normally advised. What a little pigeon shit. Does it float? It caught itself in mesh, I see, against the streaky pane. A bit a dizzy flipper. Every legend thrown through air. Well, I'm kind of with them as it happens, to be part of something big and tall. Dully den. I told you you were gay. Oh, how? Oh, now he's my son when he's acting up. Admonitions applique. That quilt coats a look at what stage does. Fly rough the feather. Out in front of folks, song and dance and games of chance. Depend upon your fellow players and plangent stars among them. What good hook the roving gaze could look upon to keep it in? Feet on the ground. Staggering 5 or 6 times because the evil eyeglasses and nylon hood about me are actors in between. The music in its daydreams grew real important to me. The Greek sophos meant both knowledge and harmony. bottle and can redemption center, what you could do if that, then what and could what would come together because Horace's right eye is the pore, his left eye the heel. He flies underneath where I break, tangles on my course. Guess is good. Help with depression. I'm not just inside of me. Hold up, there's missing. Then there's a pile so big. So frothy, I feel sick. You know how there's weather? Sometimes stumbles, sometimes falls. And with alarm, it gets going. Musty private altar oxidation. Friendly waters, friendliness, sincere. Simply goes, I get it, up to boundaries. Friendship is distension, so nary and only. Always some pattern of interference. Metal bars with an etched grip, brief drifts from the matter at hand. In the least. Better window, better door, sturdy, lucky allotment. On which frayed light to land, on what signal to show. Rub the strings of beads of heat, back and forth to frame a line. Aspiration needs a threshold, such as even fingers can. Tarry away and medicine ball to build up the core, loose grain decay. Taps at glass, takes 2 scanty sips, frail entertainments, time and a place. The building. Contrary to somehow body, how some way set before me. Precepts are so ordinary, hardly anyone must be. Stomp and let a foot fall between me and firm tympanic drum rolls every jumble needs to keep their place in line. With sight and sound and speech completely, rhythmic loss to inalien sway song. Then everybody went so hard, condensed until the inside crumbled. One scarcely knows the names to all these forms of falderall. Instead of stray, we strain it. It's abiding, strength is stretching seams. Moves about. Any kinder sweets? As usual, I'm waiting for the train. Anything you'd want to see? Sometimes showing pleases me. Passing for a private person, standard issue solid ice. That's too much credit to my stopping skills. Too porous to be styled picky-choosy. Wool rags, well boiled, smells of anise root and shoal. Felt's a hefty project, surely. Takes 2 hands to draw it out. But I'm crafty, yet I'm slow. And you know how news travels, aimless in a crowded car. Through. Careen with this body, traveling band in a buggy, synchronic process, proved rough to arrange. Had enough of form fitting, it rushed over the bone, that I knew and believed it. I could see form myself. In a word, one word of our handy incantations, gimme, gimme, shelter, shade, a pair of shoes that hide my feet. Floppy looking flapjacks, wet film over lens, angling deeper down in ground, must be by now halfway to Hong. My Knight of Cups. In terms of resonance, and I can't define, in spite of my notions, and no one delivers. The horizon held over. Actually, my eyes hurt badly. It's pressure from the sky, and in turn, I keep pulling. Sturdy dies falling, how emotion feels faded. We're supposed to meet later. Wait, it's coming to me now. A rat's nest of chicken wire, dithering on impact. Oh, projectile, my partner, of lately, my brine. With invisible hands. Promises and perils, the milestones inflate. Into what? Noisemakers, the best kind and worse. Doors open sensors, my moves confuse force, turning circles on one foot from this day forth. The messages blow up, zones and eros, a punch of chilblain on the garrulous chin. For warm confetti, make inhalations with eyes closed to the world, soured world shortening. The box that most applies. Assisted living world beyond, a nightclub called the Rubber Glove. Peace for someone who's the person, someone peace has done before. Stoop games like stoop ball, big names like Gene. Hand over hand till the moon is inside of a moon just a few feet away. There's a lot of jerks who miss the mark, but who can blame jerks' limitations? Like a braid as other braids, densely populated inner sanctums. Apply to poultice, check. A second more for practice holding, practice being in a hold. Where to look? Pictures of grandma, lit behind modillions. Don't want to lose you, I like you. Virtues of thought caught, a fly in their pages. Go crash, little bug, on ascenders. See her by her hunch and strut. Suspect of a secret, life is how I felt or knew. You know this song? Oh yes, hoot hoot. It's so long a trip on a forceps tip. Out of a million. Gonna take a while to used to get you. Longer winter, colder, a year or close to never. Let the opposite exact. A star on your shoe. Flies away gently brushed into blackberry drupelets. Music is the bid of contingency. What breaks what is the matter? Dear bud, there aren't enough problems to count every woe. Flea had a home. I just took one out. Had to fry all its eggs and cut off its reach. The aluminum lid. So rhymes a bib for endless word choice. Look through plastic and touch things. I had a flash, cornered it with twist-offs and shots, to dim, not feed. I've always been fond, as my angels demand, and better for it, get to look pleased. Stalwart meditations, to open heavy jars, unusual endeavors, cokes and empty pocketbooks. And I'll end with a toast to you and your happiness. What I really want is to make a movie, not my poem. So I open my mouth for the front of a film. We close the day shot with a tract on the snot otter. Dream closes, just like doors, clear electric, between cold air outside, dark stuff within. A hand closes round otter, knowing, you can't keep this forever, this slug. Our dreams are nothing. Their sweet-scented brown mucus, bacilly hair entwining my knuckles, covered over black eyes and soft heads signaling birth to me and rest, warmth protected in disintegration, shelf lives, is lost, my dear dreams, they fall off. Can you remember that afternoon when the park was half vacant, walking home in each other's arms? I am collecting a fund for the preservation of lust, where the wide sky, slow as it is, was key to the car. It was 6 o'clock or so, with white dappled pearlescent shell. I used to wonder, what would I do lost in hell? Would I cry? Then wondered regular, if I could escape this hell, this grand city, could I ever get away? Now I think, well, what do I do now that I'm here? Too scalding often at the mention of snow. The ferries are back and they're 24.75. They take long, and when on them you freeze. Now I know I will have my feelings and outlive it. Will it return to hang on the end? And what will a last moment be like? The thoughtfulness of a gazing star? Reach back in the swamp with grip released. When I saw the salamander, I thought of you and how mud grows, for what I don't know. So we poke at the ground with nothing to fear. The tongue adds a lash out of curious nature, while the tail trickles over some common refrain. Thank you. And I just want to say, because I didn't say it before, that I'm so excited to hear you read, Wayne.
Thank you so much, Morgan. And we are going to hear from Wayne Koestenbaum after a 5-minute break. Okay, I am your masked host, Lonely Christopher, and it is my pleasure to introduce to the stage Wayne Koestenbaum. Wayne Koestenbaum, beyond being an enduring thread in our cultural fabric, raconteur, bon vivant, and about-town bellwether a la Fran Lebowitz, is a writer of startling, almost impolite diversity. In an essay on studying under novelist John Barth, Koestenbaum identifies a driving impulse to be promiscuously non-sectarian. He's authored nearly 24 books that are all over the map: memoir, journal, essay, biography, cultural criticism, musicology, art history, queer theory, fiction, fables, poetry, hybrid weirdness, and more. Not to mention that he's a visual artist, musician, and teacher. The desire to be this multifaceted makes sense to me. Who doesn't want to be the quintessential polymath? But what's frankly shocking about Koestenbaum is how he actually pulls it off, constantly. How skillfully he pours his adroit observations into whichever container he's deemed most suitable, where others, mere pretenders, attempt similar dexterity only to wash up embarrassingly on the sullen shore of poetasters and charlatans, where the likes of James Franco lick their wounds in the shadow of their own overextended ambitions. Koestenbaum, the self-described infatuated scribe, is in love with language and uses it polymorphously to poke and prod his subjects in search of untold emotional reserves, turning them around in the light for a holistic yet unexpected perspective. He doesn't make points so much as reach them in discovery of something ever present but inchoate, like a prepubescent queer sexuality. He writes, quote, "I avoid argument because I don't want to get into fights," unquote. And it's true that his prose is more invitational than confrontational, but it does expect something of the reader, a granted permission for the author's slithery sentences to wend their way toward unexpected conclusions. There must be a readerly curiosity for the author to delicately cultivate. Koestenbaum's prose meets us not as we need it most, but as we least suspect it. He constructs dollhouses in which to organize a chaotic breadth of feeling. Quote, "You see that my emotions, if I allow them free rein, lead toward anarchy, disillusionment, rudeness, alienation, fines, fistfights, name-calling, and possibly prison," end quote. Koestenbaum's work expresses the tension between careful analysis and lusty caprice, with the author always threading the needle in ways yielding discursive treasures unreachable by conventional means. I first explored Wayne Koestenbaum in high school, accidentally. I would frequently skip class to hide in a corner of the library, reading the newspaper and books from the stacks to pass time. I randomly plucked a title off the shelf, which turned out to be a recent biography of Andy Warhol that Koestenbaum had been commissioned to write for the Penguin Lives series, which also hired Edmund White to do Marcel Proust and Elizabeth Hardwick for Herman Melville. The veil between my culturally bankrupt small town life and the world of the metropolitan creative avant-garde had been punctured as I was subject to the concentrated queering of an art icon who had been desexualized, heteronormalized, and flattened by the art establishment. Koestenbaum's Warhol is a melodious monograph that served as a fabulously lucid introduction to an artist who wanted to be a machine or a mirror, yet was undeniably flesh and blood. Koestenbaum introduced me to the figure of Julia Warhola, the artist's mother, who skulked around his basement and whose handwriting was borrowed by her son in his early period. Koestenbaum tells the story of the artist's mother bellowing, "I am Andy Warhol," a terrifically loaded statement that contains warmth and incest, jealousy and collaboration. Koestenbaum also undertook a serious evaluation of the underappreciated film work. Even though Warhol was recently the subject of a new exhaustive biography by Blake Gopnik, Koestenbaum's take on the artist remains essential, especially for the ways it catches and relishes the incidental and perverse aspects of Warhol's life that remain overlooked by others. Now I will talk briefly about Gertrude Stein. Parenthetically, somebody recently sent me a video copy of a PBS special about the opera Four Saints and Three Acts, and there on my screen appeared Wayne Koestenbaum's visage as the talking head extraordinaire. While an unsuspecting reader of the New York Review argued with Virgil Thompson in 1971 that Gertrude Stein's title, Tender Buttons, referred to, quote, a box full of buttons that she loved to sort through, end quote, we know better these days and understand the buttons as nipples as well, or primarily as nipples. But Koestenbaum, in an appreciation of the late queer theorist Eve Kozowski-Sedgwick, revealed to me that the title is actually a double entendre, as it also contains the line, tend her butt, tend her buttons. Koestenbaum's latest essay collection, Figure It Out, is full of these little surprises, things you would have noticed given the chance to figure it out. Koestenbaum exists on a plane unfamiliar to me, sees things differently, like how he describes a piano soft pedal as a device the function of which is to dampen your keyboard noodling so as not to distract the next door neighbor in your Manhattan high-rise, or how he describes taking meticulous handwritten notes about his paintings. I've never heard a painter talk about writing notes on their works in progress. Is that a common practice or one of the author's meaningful quirks? He writes about how the notes are not literature, but then contemplates what could happen to transform them. And Koestenbaum's work is crowded with transformation and transition. Quote, I'm trying to cultivate distractibility to fray the edges of consecutive thought, end quote. Koestenbaum shows us how a daydream becomes a treatise, growing functional while maintaining ineffability. Like any good opera queen, obsession haunts his work. The spectral figures of Andy Warhol, Anna Moffo, Jackie O, and Harpo Marx populating a dark forest of identity. A poet is the loser who gets to decide how the poem ends. And of his new short fiction, the publisher of his collection, The Cheerful Scapegoat, promises, quote, Koestenbaum's fables travel in circles, slipping away from their original point and leading the reader to a paradisiacal suspension of fixed categories. Intensified sentences and curlicue narratives scheme together mesmerically to convince the reader to abandon old ways of thinking. The fables alert us to the necessity of pushing language into new contortions of exactitude and aesthetic excess, end quote. He's already given us so much, and right now he's going to give us a little more. Please welcome the amazing Wayne Koestenbaum.
Wow. Wow. I wish I were the editor of a big magazine or even a little magazine, wherever you are lonely. So I could instantly rush that into print. But it's not a review, it's an essay. It's actually a dissertation. It's the whole thing. It's the whole thing. Needs nothing more. Really gratifying. Could have listened to that for hours. Well, it's so good, really, but you know the feeling. Okay, 5:48. It is so good to be back with people. Honestly, honestly. So that just needs to be lingered over. Just the fact of it. I've given one reading in Bryant Park, a joint reading over the summer, but otherwise I have not done anything in person like this. I've not brought my literature forward to the world at large in person. So it's totally a high. It's like a new form of social existence to experience this and to hear, Morgan, your tones as a really like a musical composition. As I said to Morgan after hearing his poems, it's as if Robert Creeley had been nice. I'm not saying he wasn't nice, but if Robert Creeley had been nice, and that's maybe what the soundtrack would have been like, of just in a way that Creeley's kind of exactitude of ear for found speech and for placing it in short lines that don't announce themselves aggressively as poem, but you do that in a much more songful way to create this kind of tapestry of things overheard and of your own poetic ruminations. That's a really entrancing place to dwell within, even acoustically, I should say, as the listener, since this was the first reading I heard indoors. You were what readings were totally for me, and I could just take it in literally as a sound environment of delicacies, car, fellatio, arboreal, etc., just held there. Really beautiful. So thank you for that. And I'm gonna start by reading two completely brand new poems, just because it's not always so easy to launch oneself into any kind of creative future. And so the function of readings for so many of us is to finish poems and to feel that there's a point in writing them in the first place. So for better or worse, here are two really brand new poems. The first one is called David's Eyebrows. A book of hours, sans grave rubbings, like a trousseau napkin. I met a botanist who chickened out at the last minute when I followed him to his arboretum. An all-over painting or a Bibliothèque Nationale tea room, fingering any abyss. A revisitation of The Second Sex and Minima Moralia on the same daybed. One is prelapsarian and the other is a climacteric. The centrality of the aphorism and its glands, like Sappho mixed with Armagnac. Your raised arm, a lithograph, is indirect. Stepchild, an echo of inscriptions long left obscure, a fundament that doesn't invite your golden bowl interrogation. A tender is the night stance and a posterior of my own. Other realms of Fioratura along the necropolis's marshy border. Spittle wiped from bottom lip, nipples lurking below the dispositif. Vicarious traveler at my disposal, Cyclopean Nijinsky leap. Melancholy and a Franz Hall's gestural abandon. A Daphnis and Chloe remorselessness. Splitting stubble between several inamoratos. Thick and italicized, like Michelangelo's Laurentian library. A word or two about your eyebrows while the world falls apart. And now another one of these, hallucination coat. They're written in just kind of long prosaic lines with a space between them, very kind of new sentence, but not sentences. Hallucination coat. Dreamt a novelist wore a Tyvek hallucination coat. It gave her the wherewithal to imagine plots and characters. The coat, like a thermal onesie or a sleeping bag, shrouded her body. She lay on the couch with her husband. He tried to make out with her. She accepted and rebuffed his advances. She was well aware of my presence on the couch as bystander and cheerleader. Of course, the novelist lived in New Jersey, and of course, her husband was dead. He was applying to graduate school. I walked with a dead husband in Alphabet City. Snow covered the fenced-in pavement. I moonlighted as composition instructor at a distant university. My class met on Saturday nights. I begged the administrator for a sizable office. I didn't show up for the first meeting of the class. The novelist's breasts had a life of their own, apart from her rib cage. The dead husband was not Alain Delon. The hallucination coat was not designed by Yves Saint Laurent. Over the clipped hedge, I could see the village where Rochester lost his sight. Jam on hard rusks. So that's the future. Here's the recent past from a manuscript that at the moment is called Cardboard Couture, but it's going to change its title any minute. It's a book of sonnets. They're strange sonnets because each line spawns little extra lines. So it's really like each poem is 14 stanzas, but they're not that long. They're like a page and a half. And I'm going to read the second one, which is called I, Doctor, Wanted. I wrote these in mostly before the pandemic. And then the last one was unfinished during the first 8 months of the pandemic. And then in June, or no, that can't, whatever. I finally finished the last one in 2020. So it's done. I, Doctor, wanted at last my cock combined with four-hand Mozart sonatas. His tall Norwegian wife, Kaftan, in bed with us for novelistic complexity. Chocolate chips, raisins, cashews in dish daughtered up my 3 o'clock disappearance. Time to teach math, 9th graders, my outlaw bike ride hill, a milkshake homo reverie. Forehead coin angle, COIGN, forehead coin angle legatoing me into world peace treaty dissolver or solver. Magnet dream told in St. Louis undoes how hinge folds kill you, minus Samothrace appendage. Weathercock gaming his ass. I said, you're gorgeous, to no inkling avail. Like kindling, tossing homo down grim hills, Latalania, ant lip fissure. Ant, A-U-N-T, ant lip fissure. Treacle damage me, then reverse the scar. Drop basted turkey on Kissinger foot. No peace in did they fuck speculation, cramming his memento mori pubes backward to canker Eden. Grail comes back, scar, no impediment. Gummed shame salami mispronounced. Samizdat lice poem. Tinkle the fairy arc rope, wizarding stained cruelty daughter, now regal aged Cassandra. Cram him up, celebrate him crammed, revise the cramming, call the cram cream. How redux can you make East Germany, ducky? I get plumbed by rose thorn, a Jekyll teething ring. As something a little lighter, I'm going to read from this book that was kindly mentioned and described by Lonely the Cheerful Scapegoat, Fables, published a few months ago from Semiotex. I'm going to read a short fable that was surreptitiously inspired by a Jimmy DeSana photograph. It's called Green Ice Cream Man I Didn't Love. The man was green, but the ice cream he sold from his corner truck wasn't green. He didn't carry pistachio or mint. The ice cream man I didn't love seemed to be floating in green ether. or seemed to have been born from a green womb. The womb's greenness clung to him for the rest of his life. His penis was particularly green, he told me when we hugged behind his ice cream truck. The ice cream man I didn't love was always eager to hug me because he said, "You look like a movie star." I'm not glamorous, pasty, scrawny. I have a large scar on my forehead. I touched the butt of the ice cream man I didn't love. I touched his butt during one of our protracted hugs behind his ice cream truck. His butt, lazy, harbored no remorse. Nor should a mere pair of buttocks feel contrite. Why is it the business of buttocks to huddle down with the emotions? Why must turbid anxieties disturb the calm of buttocks whose only ambition is to remain affixed to the legs and hips and torso of a person trying to make a living? My sadism and remorselessness, almost equal to the remorselessness of Edgardo's buttocks, will eventually doom me to become as green as Edgardo. Only in the last paragraph of this little narrative have I chosen to reveal the protagonist's name. I waited to tell you his name because I am afraid that Edgardo's family will read this tale and sue me for disclosing sordid details about their green paterfamilias. We are grateful that no one will ever read this tale and that no one will contact Edgardo's family. We are grateful to be invisible, not yet green, though eventually Edgardo's greenness will become my own. Oh, I left a book at my seat. I'll be right back. I'm going to read two more things. They're not instant, but they're just two more. So I have been since 2013, I've been writing what I call a trance trilogy, because the first volume was called the Pink Trance Notebooks. And the second volume, which I'm going to read now from, is called Camp Marmalade. And the third volume, which is going to be published, I'm happy to say, in February by Nightboat, is called Ultramarine. And I'm going to read a section from that. So first, from Camp Marmalade, section 24, which is subtitled "To Slow Down His Mouth, a Clear Theology of Phlegm." And it's the form of the trance trilogy is they're small aphoristic stanzas separated from each other, sometimes 3, 4, 5, 2 lines, separated from each other by space and a horizontal line. So they're meant to be taken separately, if you wish, as isolated little poems, or not. Bought porn magazine overpriced in South End. False fire alarm rousing me from the disappointing hotel. Rumpelstiltskin, the first play I went to. First opera, an abridged Hansel and Gretel. I beat the shit out of Hansel, said Gretel. Clemency for the bitter French teacher and her hard conjugations. I remember Yiddish mama, a grumpy first nighter in Warsaw, before grumpiness stressed out the shapely cat, X-rated. Prince Hal's renunciation and Walter Benjamin's renunciation, the wrinkles that make physiognomy red and revolutionary, hierarchical pharaohs leading my people downward. Distressed Munchkin, you didn't grow. I waited for the famed growth spurt. Stinky cruising in Westport toilet, a glory hole so huge it wasn't really a hole. It was a major defeat of the wall. Nude man carrying gun, nighttime near conservatory obelisk. My game was to slow down his mouth and then delete it. Hirsute daybed with cologne half Nelson. Little boy with gay father in Amsterdam wheelchair. Only happy when I'm discussing rump. Giggles come from opiated outer space. No longer hug writer vocation nervously, discard vocation, shirk or spurn it, then return to cracked, crumpled vocation, say hello to its bruises. Or just crush de neuve petals. Imagine them now parfum, a phone number version of a switched on de neuve. De neuve, simply what William James called a perching. Her fits were apparatic. Define apparatic, please. And also irenic or irenic. Dalton Trumbo leglessness and cocklessness, waking dismembered. A cheap, sinny voice. Sinny means skinny plus Pliny or Pliny, like Pliny who wrote about Mount Vesuvius erupting, or Musée Carnavalet showcasing Proust's brass bed. I'm not a storyteller, except Céline filth identity, cilia of our filth, a draped serrure, a car's child lock. Make it a dialogue between two wounds, car crashes, the devout and the simpleton. Squash the simpleton by sitting on his face. No wonder your son is acting out in class, and then you say Rosh Hashanah and loudly cackle and freak out. Henceforth, a life devoted to obscenity as release from Babel, B-A-B-E-L, or stranglehold of imaginary law of the mother, a chapter Lacan forgot to write. Tit in his crude mouth, obsessed with powers of syllable tit as molecular agent of language. Tit palindrome sets off language as a bad mood sets off an angry mouth. He tried to sexually harass me with a Jeb Bush or Oliver North mask appended to his ass as he thorped me. Thorped is thoroughly porked plus herpes provender. A diagnostic moment for Shilly. Shilly is Lily Marlene plus Shirley Temple, the drink, and macadam also pretending to be macaroon. Sneezing without a clear theology of phlegm. Nearness to Bouvier, but forgiven Bouvier, not the imperious version. In dream, kissed her full pouty lips, Catholic mass in progress. She said, I take the mass seriously. I silently agreed to swallow her mass. Reading about South Boston busing in 1975 before college, not understanding Boston except as a cloud of buses. Did I dream last night of Langy School of Music's stone house and my mother's friends studying there in 1950 and my valse noble et sentimentale ham-handed in 1977? Someone decapitated a co-worker in a factory. Describe rage of a fired worker. Joyce Carol Oates' Zombie. Tell my mother's father I'm reading Childwold and not sure if he's impressed. Buffalo, when I was 20 years old, Albright Knox Museum, Jackson Pollock, Defamiliarization, Snow, and Country Club. Unable to chat tennis, golf, or stockbroking. The privilege of dying among her books is gone, libraries stored, dispersed. First babysitter Gail across the street, cocoa mouth savor or more cocoa mouth savor or more educational like saffron. In dream, did it signify maturation or deliquescence that my paints splattered and I no longer kept them neatly pooled on pallets? And finally, a shorter bit from Ultramarine. This is section 10 called Clytemnestra's Schnapps, because doesn't she need it? I was thinking, what's the difference between Camp Marmalade and Ultramarine as books? Not that you have to care, but I care because I've been proofreading it like a maniac for the past 5 months. The difference, I think, is that Ultramarine is more sad in some way, more final, and also more condensed, less. And I think this is in every book I've written, there's this same trajectory from a certain cascading rhapsodic quality in the first parts, and then a sobering condensation and an accepting of limitations as the book proceeds. It's almost like you could say it's a kind of mania and then depression, or just a kind of false exaltation, and then a sterner Spartan coming to terms. Almost, or is that I begin every booklet as if I'm Thomas Wolfe and I end it like Loreen Niedecker, if I were lucky, which I'm not. Okay, so Clytemnestra's schnapps. Dreamt wallet fell in toilet. Nepal earthquake. Yellow-orange daffodils in blue vase autoimmunity scholar gave us 20 years ago. Don't ask voice teacher for permission, just touch my nose while I sing. Explaining Sprechstimme to the man on the moon. Dreamt Mrs. T peed on floor, or did she sit neglected on a towel? He'll remove wax chunks from my blocked ears. Girl cries and says, I'm tired, I'm depressed, and then says nothing more. Could have bragged my father knew Angela Davis, but did he really know her? Why did Anna Moffo get a nose job? Did it alter her resonance? How long a convalescence? Stuffed ears sounds like a dish at a cosmopolitan restaurant. Ears farci. Repose was gift I spurned. Most words from him I feared because they were triangulated. Lemons match and augment daffodils. Speaking ill of the dead is another book idea. Hapa hapa raida. To explain what that enigmatic sung phrase meant, write a disquisition on Tanta. No funeral for Aunt Alice, who witnessed domestic wreckage and mother knife. Dreamt last night she rose from the dead and stabbed father in the eye. Did Sontag read The Law of Genre? Find the photo of Claude Cahun posing as my refugee neighbor auditioning for Carousel. Peter Hujar's lover called me a sissy intellectual, a dying breed. Blue irresolute used condom on hillside for Verdi baritones climbing almost as high as tenors. A Sophia Loren Sachertorte movie. A hobbyist whose full-time job is pretending she's friends with celebrities. Mariah Carey, Queen Latifah, Bradley Cooper. More about Bradley Cooper, please. Dreamt loose cum dripped or spattered all over my chest and belly, maybe 3 times as much cum as customary, drooling in red tulle gown and succumbing to compulsive cough like Dora's famous catarrh. Video of guy who comes without touching his cock while doing push-ups. Video frightening of guy sucking himself sitting in a rocking chair. Riding Tanta Alisa's lap on rocking chair. Rida might have been Reiter, rider. Find Shuli, Elizabeth Subrin film recreating Shulamith Firestone. Smell burnt wet arson house. Look inside and see a stuffed Easter time animal amid ashes. Car crash, handsome son driving, his mother almost killed. I faint at sight of her swollen, contused head in hospital. Explain Electra schnapps. Clytemnestra drinking schnapps. Orestes dispensing schnapps. Chrysothemis pouring schnapps in her own ears. to improve her hearing or to approach Dionysian origin of Electra's primal thrust? To think and sing, Clytemnestra invents invisible schnapps, viscous in a mouth neutral enough to leave unmodified the rancorous nectar. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening.